Hi, I'm Jim Rudolph. I'm a geriatrician and palliative care physician, and I'm here today to talk to you about changing delirium practice. I've spent a long time in my career trying to implement and change the practice that we delivered in our hospital about delirium. And what I've learned along the way is that there are a lot of steps in implementation. And it's a complex process. And as we're going through that process, we blunder. We make mistakes. I call it part of learning. And it's a necessary part of the process, in my opinion. My goal here today is to inspire you to go forth in your institution and implement a delirium program. And I hope that I'm going to inspire you by showing you some of the mistakes I've made along the way. Delirium is complex, and there's a huge pathophysiology and a huge literature to support risk factors in all sorts of areas around delirium. The brain is wonderfully complex, and the fundamental components are impaired in delirium. And we may think that that's an issue with the complexity of delirium and the complexity of our health system, and how are we ever going to get the two? But bear with me, because I think there's some simple things that can be done to help improve delirium care and get a system implemented at your facility. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the people who care about delirium. There aren't a lot of us in the world. In my experience, it's only been one or two people at every hospital that really have a passion for delirium. Those are complex people, which is why they care about delirium. But that doesn't mean we need to go it alone. Everywhere I've ever worked, delirium has not been a top priority. In fact, it's often been at the bottom of the list. There are other things that rise to the top: costs, length of stay, safety. And with only a few people, it can seem like you're fighting up this mountain. The good news is that scientists before us have come through and identified a ton of areas which delirium is associated with. And this opportunity gives us to engage with some of these groups that exist in health systems around falls, restraint use, length of stay, costs, readmission. All of these are risk factors for bad patient outcomes, or bad patient outcomes to begin with. And all of them are also risk factors for delirium. So there's a natural way to build that bridge. So my first blunder was starting really big. I didn't know what I was doing necessarily, and we got together as a committee, and we sat at a table with every engaged party. And the good news is that everyone was there, said delirium is important. We're gonna make a difference in delirium. And then when the committee meeting was over, nobody did anything. And after we brought together this committee and brought together our findings, which said delirium is really important, the hospital head said, yes, delirium is really important. Why don't you start a task force? The next blunder I made was thinking that lectures and education change practice. I come from an academic background, and I really believe that education has some value, but education changes knowledge, not practice. So during our delirium implementation, I did lots and lots of lectures, and my team was around me, supporting me, doing in-services, and it's close to 150, 160 lectures that we did. And I can tell you that the impact clinically from that lecturing or from that educational initiative was very low in terms of actual engagement with patients. Most times, the impact of formal educational strategies is nothing. The next blunder I made was trying to pile on additional work. We've learned during COVID that we're all really stretched as healthcare providers, and that is nurses, physicians, nursing assistants, pharmacists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, dietitians. We're all really, really stretched and struggling to just get our work done. So doing more is really, really hard. My blunder came in terms of trying to implement a nursing assessment. Um, if you think about it, a formal nursing assessment for delirium involves assessment of formal mental status function, and then followed by an algorithm or some criteria for delirium. And that requires time, training, and for us it required changing the scope of practice. It was a big endeavor, and in the end, nurses weren't able to uptake it because they didn't have the bandwidth. Let's think of this another way, a more practical way. If I want you to do a 15-minute assessment on each of your 8 patients, that's 2 hours of extra day per shift that I'm expecting you to do. It's not going to happen. What we did find, though, is there were some opportunities for streamlining practices that made a big difference in people's lives. The first one we found was that we could direct nurses' energies towards specific patients who were at high risk for delirium. And we did this using existing and known criteria for delirium. We just programmed them into our medical record to compile a list of patients to say, hey, nurse or nurse manager, here's where you want to direct your energy today. And it was a nice way to engage them, provide them information that they needed without them having to do extra work. Our strategy for doing this electronically worked okay, but it really identified that high-risk group of people that we wanted nurses to pay attention to. Another area of streamlining is in the cognitive assessment. And we really drilled this down to the bare minimum. So we used months of the year backwards as our assessment of attention. And then we used the Richmond Agitation and Sedation Scale, and specifically the modified Richmond Agitation Sedation Scale, for our assessment of arousal. It turns out that these are also used in other areas, or can be used in falls assessments and pressure ulcer assessments. So there's a real opportunity to double up on some other parties that were already interested in this. For those unfamiliar, the RAS is simply asking a patient, please describe how you're feeling today, and then scoring the response over the next 15 seconds. That's all it takes. Can they talk to me? Are they engaged? Or are they a little bit more agitated or jumpy? Or can they not wake up enough to speak with me? Our initial work found that the RAS was sensitive and highly specific for delirium. We were capturing people who had delirium with this tool. Its sensitivity really increased when we looked at RAS from day to day to day, and that was a big jump. Since we did our initial work, the RAS has been validated multiple times as an assessment of arousal that also has reasonable sensitivity and specificity for delirium. The other part we found is that while RAS is good at identifying delirium, combining it with another assessment of attention really amps up the ability to detect delirium. And talking about building collaborations, we had a restraint committee who was very interested in identifying people before they were in restraints. And what we found is that our combination of RAS and months of the year backwards was able to pick people up who would be in restraints at 4 times the rate of the general population. And that's a tremendous energy savings and time savings for that committee. We also found that those people who cannot do months of the year backwards and who could not wake up enough to speak with us, were only about half of them went home. And so we had a real opportunity to engage our social work colleagues and our case management colleagues earlier in the discharge process to help them get home. Also, if your hospital is concerned about mortality, those patients who can't do months of the year backwards and RAS have a much higher mortality. So streamlining an assessment and standardizing it really had benefit beyond just delirium. I also made an initial blunder in saying, oh, we'll just do assessments and then we'll react with something. Doing assessments without action was a really not a great step in my career. Here's how we reacted to that, though, is that we put a toolbox on a ward, on each ward actually, with stuff in it. And the stuff is not magical. It's got portable hearing amplifiers, reading glasses, magnifiers, cognitive stimulation, so playing cards, puzzles, word searches, and then sleep promotion items, earplugs, sleep masks, music for relaxation. What's exciting is that when a nurse went to the patient's bedside and handed something out from that toolbox, we found that length of stay decreased by almost a half a day. Restraint use plummeted. There was a minimal change in mortality, and it wasn't statistically significant. But the real part for us was the hospital costs dropped by about $1,400 per item that we handed out from that toolbox. It's a pretty amazing return on investment to be able to say, yes, handing out this stuff helps save costs. I made a blunder though, and so I didn't get upper level stakeholder support. Let me explain a little. So I worked in our Delirium toolbox to engage nursing, to engage other physicians, to engage certified nursing assistants, to engage pharmacists in this process of delirium assessment and delirium prevention. Who I didn't do a good job of engaging was our leadership and the decision makers. And that cost us really big. So picture this. We've completed our project. We show we save $1,400 per item in the toolbox that we hand out. This toolbox, the return on investment for it is 3 days for the entire year. It's a minimal investment per hospital. And I presented this at Grand Rounds. The hospital was there. The nursing staff came out to support me. My physician colleagues were there. And our chief of medicine stood up at the end and said, "This is great. What we're going to do to implement this delirium toolbox is we're going to get a box of earplugs for every ward." I was crushed, not recognizing that I had not gotten the stakeholder support cost me the entire program because the chief of medicine had realized that the entire program had come down to earplugs, and it wasn't about the education and the engagement and the assessment and the direction of energy that we had invested so heavily in. Another blunder I'm going to say is being no fun. People are engaged, or people want to be around other people who are fun. And delirium is a very serious topic. And if you read any article on delirium, the first paragraph is going to talk about the high mortality, the incredibly high prevalence, how we don't do enough to address delirium in the hospital, that people with delirium don't recover. And that's not us, all right? So I'm part of this World Delirium Awareness Day, and we're out to say, hey, delirium is very serious, and we all need to take it into account. But we're here to also say, hey, delirium is very serious, but we're passionate about it, and we can have fun doing this. During our World Delirium Awareness Day where did it go? There it is. No, I gotta go this way. There it is. During our World Delirium Awareness Day in 2019, we started calling ourselves Delirium Superheroes. And that's the shirt I wear today, is my Delirium Superhero shirt. So come and join us on World Delirium Awareness Day and have a little fun with a topic that is incredibly serious, but you'll know that you're engaged with other people throughout the world in this area. The other part is going it alone. I mentioned how there's very few of us in each hospital who are doing this. And regardless of where you are in the world, there's a society that's there to help engage people or professionals in healthcare, patients, caregivers who have dealt with delirium. All the societies are open. So there's the European Delirium Association, the Australasian Delirium Association, and then the American Delirium Association. Please consider joining one of these societies and engaging with other delirium professionals who are just as passionate as you. The final part is just to say thank you. Thank you for engaging on World Delirium Awareness Day. Thank you for taking the time. It's together that we're going to make a difference. And we hope that World Delirium Awareness Day is a strong part of what we do.